The other day I received a comment on my Fallout 76 in 2024 video, asking if the game was pay to win. I replied saying that it wasn't, but that there are some items you can pay for to get an advantage. I then ended up with a reply from someone new, saying that it is in fact pay to win for a host of reasons. I'll put the whole exchange on screen so you can pause the video and read through it all if you so wish. Now before you get your hopes up, this isn't going to be a Sarge vs Khorne video. Yes, the user's name is Khorne. I don't think they're necessarily wrong in claiming that the game is pay to win, nor do I think that I have been incorrect for saying that it's not pay to win. The issue is that the term pay to win doesn't have a nailed down definition which everyone agrees with, and that's what I want to focus on in this video. Where should you be drawing the line with what is and what isn't pay to win? I don't often ask this at the start of the video, but I would be interested in hearing what you would define pay to win as right now. And I'd also be interested to know if your opinion changes at all once you've reached the end of the video. If so, please do leave a comment. Anyway, to discuss this matter properly, I first want to go through half a dozen role-playing games and put them on this pay-to-win scale. The reason I'm going to focus on RPGs is because that's what my channel's centred around. First up on the list of games is Final Fantasy. I'm putting the OG Final Fantasy on this list because it has nothing extra you can pay for in-game. You bought the game, well that's it, you now own 100% of it, and there's nothing more you can buy for the game itself. I'm treating this as the guaranteed cannot possibly be classified as pay-to-win game, and putting it on the very left side of the scale. Next up on the list is Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning. Where this game differs from Final Fantasy is that it has DLC. There's a couple of pieces of standard DLC with The Legend of Dead Kell and Teeth of Naros. Both of these add in new regions, but also a multitude of unique equipment. Some of this equipment is quite good, and a player who has not purchased any of the DLC obviously won't have access to them. While I don't truly believe anyone would class this as pay to win, it is also entirely true that players who have paid for the DLC are the only ones with access to this content, meaning there could be an argument made for it. What has more of a feeling towards the whole pay to win sort of thing is the Special Delivery Chest. One of the first locations in the game houses this chest, filled with very strong early game loot, and the way you get the chest in the game is by buying it. If you spend real world money, then you can use better early game items and have a small stat boost to your character from the very start. It seems some of the items also came as a pre-order bonus, or by being a member of certain services or the like. The reason I'm a little vague here with the acquisition process is because I'm not actually sure how it was. All I really know is that in the here and now, all the special delivery stuff seems to just be instantly added into the game, without the need to pay extra for it. That's certainly the case for me with the game on Steam, but maybe it's different on console. Overall though, there are DLCs for this game which you could pay real money for, which grant you access to some decent bits of gear. As such, I'm putting Kingdoms of Amalur a little further to the right, although still very close to the not pay to win side of the scale. Next game is Fallout New Vegas, and this is quite a similar one. There's the standard content DLC that we're all used to, but there's also the item packs. The first of these is Courier's Stash. Originally this was 4 different DLCs: the Caravan Pack, Classic Pack, Mercenary Pack, and Tribal Pack. These were pre-order bonuses you could get by purchasing the game at specific retailers. However, nowadays all 4 have been combined into the Courier's Stash, which you can simply buy at your leisure in order to get a bunch more equipment. There's also Gunrunner's Arsenal, which adds a bunch of new weapons into the game, as well as some challenges and a perk. The focus here though is on the Courier's Stash. As soon as you've made your character and step out into the wasteland, the game will place a host of strong items directly into your inventory. From personal experience, I know that these weapons can work admirably for a long time in the game. I even once went and beat a Deathclaw at level 1 with this gear, which should give you a decent idea of how strong it is. In my eyes, this is a little more to the right than Amalur was. Not only is this DLC still acquired by paying for it, I feel the boost it gives to your character is arguably stronger. If we're going to discuss DLC and the like, then I think our next port of call should be Skyrim. Like the previous 2 games, there are DLCs you can purchase which include extra equipment. I remember back when I only had the base game, I could never have an archer with as high a damage rating as someone who had purchased Dawnguard, and had crossbows available to them. But this is par for the course at this point. What I instead want to focus on here are mods and the Creation Club. With the addition of Anniversary Edition, we've seen a version of Skyrim with a host of powerful new spells, weapons and more, all added to the game at a real-world price. When Anniversary Edition first came out, I made a video talking about how Skyrim AE is even more unbalanced than base level Skyrim is. Getting strong equipment has now become even easier at every point in the game, and a brand new player nowadays would likely be much stronger than one picking up the game a few years ago. Purchasing Creation Club items can be a real way to put in money and get out power, but you could also argue that you can get free mods which make you just as strong, if not more so. And this is where the waters get muddied. Do we count it as pay to win if there's also a free way to gain power? Tricky to say, so I think I'll put it here on the scale. The next game is Shadow of War, and this will be a quick one. After all, there's just some fairly standard DLC nowadays. Pretty much will go in line with the other games, but maybe even more to the left than some of them. But it wasn't always this way. Previously the game had a big old microtransaction store, where you could buy orc captains as well as upgrades for them with real money. On top of this, the very end of the campaign was quite the grindfest, and many players claim that this was done specifically to encourage people to spend money on buying better captains. Rather than trying to beat the biggest, toughest orc in combat and then recruit them, you can simply buy your own instead. Much easier. As it stands presently, I place this on the left, but at launch this game would likely be the most far right one we've seen so far. I think it's about time to talk about the game which started this whole discussion, Fallout 76. There's a few different elements in the game to go over. First is the Atom Shop, where players can spend their atoms on many different things. Outfits, emotes, player icons, and many more purely cosmetic items can be bought here. But there are also several consumables, such as lunchboxes, which grant temporary in-game buffs to make your character better in some way. None of the buffs are anything crazy strong, but they do objectively improve your character in some way. All of these are bought with atoms, which can be earned in-game, but can also be bought with real money. The fact you can technically earn these items without paying a cent is something that can be mulled over further as we move on to talking about the scoreboard. The scoreboard inside of 76 is a track you progress on by completing in-game challenges. The more challenges you complete within the given time frame, the more rewards you'll get. Most of the rewards are pretty basic stuff, bonus caps, experience, cosmetic items, but every once in a while you do end up with something that could be considered quite useful, such as the Union Power Armor. This is a set of power armor which could be obtained from progressing through the Season 10 scoreboard. While the primary way players would do this would be simply to play the game, do the challenges as they appear, and earn the rewards, it is also possible to pay in order to jump ahead in the scoreboard. This means that you can get the rewards earlier than any other players through using your wallet, or could save yourself a lot of time and effort by just blowing cash instead. This is something where the rewards aren't exclusive to those paying, but are easier to obtain. When talking about things exclusive to those that are paying, we should look at Fallout first. This is a subscription service which grants a host of bonuses, such as the scrap box, player tent, and bonus rewards from both the Atom Shop and scoreboard. The scrap box and tent in particular are big bonuses, which can only be obtained by paying real world money. If you want to no longer have to worry about junk eating up your limited storage space, then you can pay for that privilege. Super clear-cut advantage that is given to players who pay real money, and held back from players who don't, which easily puts this game the closest to pay to win out of all of them so far. It is worth noting that Fallout 76 is an online game. Technically, it could be considered an MMORPG, and this kind of thing is much more common within that subgenre. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of experience with these games though. Fallout 76 is the only one I really have played a significant amount of, but fortunately, I have a friend who is much more versed in the world of MMOs. Elle Sinlock is not only the channel's resident Doctor Who expert, but she has also played a ton of Elder Scrolls Online. Before writing the script for this video, I got in touch with her to ask about ESO and Pay to Win, and she had a lot to say. Like, this level of a lot. There's quite a bit to go over, so I'm going to list Elle's main points here. We've got expansion/DLC areas, guild skill lines, sky shards, potions, food and other minor use consumables, lycanthropy and vampirism, crown crate/loot boxes, ESO Plus subscription. That's quite a few different things you can pay for, but she does a good job of clarifying what is and what is not of actual use. The DLC expansion areas seem to be very valuable to acquire, but fall into a similar category as the earlier games I mentioned, where you are getting a whole host of new content when you pay. The guild skill lines and sky shards seem relatively powerful buffs to have, but she clarifies that new players can't just out and out buy them. Instead, you essentially have to earn them once, and then can purchase more after that. So you still have to do the work first time around, but can pay to skip some of the grind, I suppose. The general consumables are seen as pretty terrible, so anyone in the know will typically avoid them. A case of, sure, they'll technically make you better, but not by much. sounds quite similar to stuff like the lunchboxes in 76. As for the crates, they mostly seem to contain these consumables or cosmetic items, putting them in a similar category, but with an element of chance thrown into the mix. Becoming a werewolf or vampire is something you can pay for, but apparently the community is quite good, and players are willing to bite you if you want so that you can get these things for free. Honestly, my favourite thing about working on this video might just be learning that ESO players are happy to bite you if you give consent. Love it. Finally, there's the ESO subscription, which once again sounds fairly similar to Fallout First. Given the sheer amount of potential stuff to buy, I'd say this is the highest on the scale out of all the games on the list. But does the term pay to win truly apply to it? When I asked Elle, she didn't think it quite fit, and instead called it pay for convenience. And it is at this point that I want to give some definitions and categories. My entire problem with online discussion of pay to win is that it's too broad to truly know what the other person means without digging deep into their specifics. I asked my patrons what they would describe as pay to win and got a reply back from Tifa who said this.
If you have the option to invest money in in-game purchases to gain advantages in the gameplay. So not just cosmetic, pet, fun stuff, but actual advantages that other players don't have that do not pay for them. The game might be hard to beat or achievements not in reach if you don't pay.
I think this is a perfectly fine definition, but I doubt most of you watching would have said the same thing. You've likely got your own requirements for what qualifies as pay to win and what doesn't. As for me, I see it as such. A pay to win game is one where you need to spend money in order to have a reasonable chance of progressing through the game. As an example of this, I want to briefly talk about Warhammer 40k Warpforge. This is a collectible card game that I would consider as being pay to win. I played several matches and lost every single one. And not only lost, I got stomped. There was genuinely no way for me to win any of the matches that I ended up in. I have plenty of experience with these sorts of games, having played a lot of Magic the Gathering in the past. I used to regularly play MTG Arena, and even when starting out in that game, I could win a fair number of my matches. Sure, I didn't have the best cards to start out, but the starter decks were good enough that with smart plays and a little luck, you could achieve victory. That was not my experience with Warpforge. Even when I played perfectly, it was a simple case of my opponent always had better cards for me, and victory was simply impossible. I lost every single match by an absolute mile, as my opponent would always just have flat out better cards for me on every single turn. And if I wanted to get better cards, then all I need to do is pay to open some booster packs. This is what I'm talking about when I say pay to win. It is not realistic for me to win at the game without paying money. Every other game I've talked about on this list is one where I could power through the content without ever truly feeling the need to pay real money to progress. Instead, the previous games would be classified as either pay for convenience or pay for advantage. Pay for convenience would be things like spending atoms in Fallout 76 to advance the scoreboard. You can still get there without spending a penny, but by paying you speed up the process. If a game has things that can be obtained without money, but also with money, then I'd say it falls under this category. Pay for advantage would be more like the courier's stash. You've paid real world money in order to get items or effects which give you an advantage of some kind that players who do not pay cannot get. It doesn't necessarily make you stronger than them, or even raise the overall power level, but it could give you an edge which the non-paying player cannot acquire. In my opinion, all three of these, pay for convenience, pay for advantage, and pay to win, are all negatives when discussing games. But I feel it is important to distinguish between them in order to avoid situations like the comment thread I showed at the start. Khorne presented themselves as disagreeing with me wholeheartedly, even though both of us were openly acknowledging that there are microtransactions in the game. The only real point of conflict between us comes down to definition. Because pay to win is a somewhat loose term, it can be thrown around in places where you personally may think it doesn't belong. While I'd love to see my own free tier definition come into wider use, I'll accept if all this video does is get you to briefly ponder the subject as a whole. As I said at the start, please do comment below with your own thoughts on the subject. Also, if you enjoyed this sort of discussion, do let me know by leaving a like or subscribing, and I may consider tackling some other topics. A big thank you to my patrons, not only for their continued financial support of this channel, but also for giving their own takes, which I was able to use in this video. If you want to join their ranks, the link is in the end card and description below. As always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.